This is the second of 5 virtual community engagement events hosted by Colorado Springs School District 11. My name is Patty Pierce, and I will be your moderator this evening. Tonight's Beyond the Mask topic is learning in the pandemic age, how to help your student online, in person, and in life. We have a panel of district leaders and experts joining us tonight who will be addressing the questions that have been posed. Let's start our evening out with introductions from tonight's panelists. When I call your name, panelists, please wave so that everyone can put a face and a name together. Are we ready? Mr. Jason Jorgensen. Do you see him? Okay. Dr. Michael Thomas. Ms. Leanne Slamma. Mr. David Engstrom. Ms. Phoebe Bailey. Mr. John McCarran. Dr. David Kolicki. Mr. Brian Relic, Mr. Corey Notstein, Miss Melissa Smead. Did I miss anybody? Are we good? Okay. Before we begin the question and answer session with our panelists, I would like to share with you 2 D11 students who will be helping us out tonight with asking some of the questions. The first student is an Achieve online freshman, Brianna White. Brianna shares with us how the pandemic has impacted her learning and her life. Brianna.
We are currently out of red, so we're 100% virtual learning right now. So in the county, is there a waiver that parents can sign so that kids don't have to continue to go in and out of school?
Okay, would somebody like to answer that question for us?
I'll take that first question, and just want to also take the opportunity to welcome our community. Thank you again for tuning in, and thank you for those who will watch this conversation perhaps after the live session. It really means a lot to us to ensure that we are engaging with our community and hearing our community on a variety of topics as we think about what does a post-COVID D11 and community look like. And so this really helps us understand, how we can best prepare and plan for that. So thank you in advance. The question I definitely want to say, going in and out, I think is probably the most challenging for all involved. If I could paraphrase some parent feedback that I've received, our staff can't become experts in either. And I think that's the biggest challenge right now, is that even when we're in school prior to the fall break, many of our staff, and I'm sure our students, are subconsciously wondering, is this the day my school is going to go into quarantine, or will we be shut down? I can understand and empathize with families who might get a call at 8 o'clock in the evening because tomorrow the school doesn't have enough staff to come into the school based upon quarantine practices. So I know that that's a challenge because, like I said, even when you're there physically, you're not mentally present. And to really engage in deep learning and instruction, you have to be mentally present. There is no waiver specifically that a family can sign, other than a family always has the right to choose for remote instruction to have consistency. And prior to the fall break, we were having so many of our schools, due to staffing structural challenges, go in and out of quarantine, that we felt it was the best and prudent decision starting the return from fall break through the winter break and the new year, when we know there's going to be traveling, we know there's going to be mass family and friends gathering, the increased likelihood of infection rates going up, to bring some consistency to our district. And that's why we and many in our region have went to an all remote platform. And we are working with our county officials to find ways that schools specifically can get waivers, so that gives us greater flexibility to keeping our schools open. So when we return, that we can return permanently. And maybe there will be that classroom closure, or maybe it's a grade level closure, but we're really, really striving to prevent whole school closures, so we can really end that level of disruption to instruction as well as to learning.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas. Maybe now we can roll the video for Brianna. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
For one, my birthday's coming up, and I can hardly spend it with anyone, and I'm used to spending it with a lot of people. But more academically, even though I'm in an online school that does everything on the computer, I've only ever worked in campus. Like, even on snow days, I have trouble focusing and I can't get any work done, and even just logging into the class itself for attendance can be hard. So not being in person, not having that focus of a school surrounding is really hard. I do make it to my WebEx meetings twice a week, and I do the work there, but out of those meetings, I can't find myself enough to focus enough to get my work done. So I fail. We're doing everything as a school that we can. I know in my school, no desks are too close. Even like siblings that come in, they don't sit together. All of the chairs are at least 3 to 4 feet apart, if not further. And we're all wearing our masks, and in order to take a drink or to eat, you have to be in the cafeteria. So no water bottles, no bringing in drinks like I'm used to. So that's different, but it is, I feel it's helping. Following the security.
Great. Oh, thank you, Brianna, for those great words. The second student that's going to be helping us tonight with some questions is a Doherty senior, Destiny Carter. Let's hear how the pandemic has impacted her.
I have a brother who's in 9th grade, a sister who's in 7th grade, and my grandmother also takes care of my little cousin who's in 6th grade and her sister who's in kindergarten for school during the school day. And so we all sit in the dining room at the table all together on the computers. And it can be a little hard sometimes because the internet will go out for some of us, or it'll just stop, or it buffers on either side for us or the teacher, and sometimes the internet just turns off, so that can be pretty hard. And it can get loud sometimes because everyone talking at once can be difficult, and my little cousin has a band, so that can also be a little bit hard, listening to a clarinet while you're trying to focus in class. I think it's just overwhelming because not even just me, but like other students, you can see their parents will stop them in classes. Other students' parents will stop them during class and have them like stop to like help them or something, or kids will just leave in the middle of class, or no one turns on the camera, so you don't know who's in class and who's not and who's listening. And I feel like grades have gone down a lot more because of this, because like technological difficulties getting stuff turned in because everything's online now, so that's hard. And then you have teachers who are like older and don't understand all the technology, so that can also be hard for everyone.
Wow, hearing it right from them. Thank you, Destiny. We all know that there's been so many challenges to overcome with this pandemic, and we want everyone to know that these conversations are a way for us to engage with our community, during this time to share thoughts and processes we are using to address the challenges. I'd like to invite a few of our panelists to share with us some helpful resources for families during this remote learning time. I'm going to start with Dr. Thomas, then we'll move directly to Mr. Notstein, and then he will share some social emotional well-being resources, and then we'll go to Ms. Smead and Mr. McCarran for some technology tips. Dr. Thomas.
Thank you. And thank you to our students who are bringing a perspective to the conversation. And again, when you hear it directly from our students, it's hard to deny that lived experience. I can put myself at that dining room table trying to learn math while I'm listening to a clarinet, and how distracting that must be. And from the parents, I can speak to you also as a parent, supporting one in college and one who's a senior. And it is a struggle. It is a challenge. It's not one that I think parents take lightly. And that's something that I know even I, as a parent, find myself at frustration points, having to work through some of the internet buffering things and calling internet companies because we should have a clear signal and we're not. And so those are real challenges that many of our parents are going through. And then we also heard, our students talking about some of our staff who also on the staff side find various challenges that come into play, whether it's some of the connectivity issues, or perhaps it's not having all the resources at your fingertips, all the time. We are in those less than ideal conditions for learning. And I have long stated that being in our classrooms is the best place for learning to occur, for instruction to occur, for support to occur. And we do long for those days. And we are hoping that we're seeing that light at the end of the tunnel, with a lot of changes happening, across the country and across the world, quite frankly. I think with all the practices of the distancing you heard our students talking about, those are very real things that I want to thank our students and our staff for doing. I know they can be inconvenient, but that does help us keep our schools open. There are a variety of things that I think we as a district can do to be of best support to our community during these times. And we started a lot of that last summer. Mr. Notstein and his team put together a lot of videos and supports around mental health on the front side of this school year, knowing that we didn't know what the future would hold, and so we wanted to do a lot of that preparation and support resources up front. And he'll speak to a little bit more of those in depth. We also know that having those regular touch points, even though we might not be able to physically be with one another in our schools, we still want to make sure, and I know our staff are committed to making sure that they're making those phone calls home, keeping those virtual office hours, so that we are able to have not only the classroom support, but also that one-to-one support for students as needed. I know that it's been maybe even a little bit slightly more challenging for some of our other special populations of students who might be receiving special education support, English language support, literacy support, and some of our students who are on the gifted spectrum and really needing some of that social interaction that is being denied based upon how COVID is restricting some of our engagements. And again, working with our teachers in our school-based staff, we do try to find ways that we can bring resources directly to our families while they're at those home environments, as well as when our students are with us. And it's a very fine line, because we're not trying to push our responsibility into the home. I want to be very clear about that. We understand that our parents are our students' first and foremost teachers, highly influential in their lives. But the technical aspect of academic instruction is something that we are proud to continue to offer, and that we are proud to continue to support. And we know, and I mean, even when we're without COVID, and if any of you parents can empathize with this, some of the homework, particularly maybe math that they're bringing home. I know as a parent, I'm not too sure. This might be a little bit out of my league, and I would have to find that support at school. Those relationships are still vitally important, I think, to the success of our students, so that we keep that homeschool relationship. And again, this type of venue is also our way of making sure that we are having conversation with our community in this virtual space, but also hearing themes and areas that we can improve upon, so that your student is the most successful, whether they're in hybrid, in full remote, or in our schools. So with that, I do want to turn it over to Mr. Notstein, who can talk a little bit more about some of our parental support, more specifically around that whole social, emotional, and overall mental health wellness, both for our students and our families, but also our staff, because we know that we're asking a lot of our D11 employees.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Thomas, and good evening, D11 community. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. And Dr. Thomas did speak to some of the things that we started early on last spring, starting to do for families in terms of resources. But before I jump into those, I had an opportunity to just hear from families and community members that are supporting youth while they learn, and both at home and when they were in schools. And I have a 7-year-old son who's home too, a D11 student, and I share this for, I guess, a couple of reasons. One, I recognize that I am not as good as a parent that I want to be every day. I struggle. My child, I know, is more emotionally dysregulated than probably normal. It's frustrated with technology, and working at home like many of our families are. You're in the middle of lots of things, and your child walks in on you and they need help in that moment. And that moment is probably not conducive for your needs as an employee to whoever you're serving. But you know you need to stop and do that. And I can tell you, I walk in and sometimes I'm short and I don't have the patience that I need. And I have to apologize, right? I have to take the moment to recognize that I wasn't everything I needed to be for my son in that moment. And I think many of our families are probably feeling that way. They want to be the very best parent first, and probably trying to be the best teacher. And I didn't know my geometry shapes anymore, apparently. And I too had to go back and learn some of those. And your child's looking for you for all the answers, right? As an adult, sometimes they think you own every answer to every situation. And the reality is you don't. And I think first and foremost, one thing that we probably should do as we continue to be in this space is let's just stop and give ourselves some grace, number one, and say, it's okay that I'm not going to be the best parent today, but I'm going to repair that with my child before the day ends. And find those opportunities to really listen to our children, our students, and understand what's going on for them. And sometimes they're really reluctant to share that. Right now, they get frustrated. They just want to be left alone. They're probably more disengaged from a family unit because you're spending so much time together. They're looking for space in that environment. And so you're navigating a lot of things with inside the home that you probably have never had to navigate before. And I want to talk about just a couple of things. One, that you might be able to do in that space with your child, but also what are resources are available to you now, and how can you access them? So I want to talk about some of the resources, and some of these are great community partners with District 11. United Way has been a fantastic partner both prior to the pandemic and now. If you're not familiar with what's called 211.org, it's a great resource bank. And so if you're trying to find anything in our community related to food services, financial support, counseling support, medical support, anything that's basically your basic needs to survive, 211 has a resource that you can connect to. And so the easiest way I find to get to the website, and there's lots of ways to search for Colorado, but one of the easiest ways I have found is go to 211colorado.org. And that'll take you right to Colorado's page. You can put in your zip code, whatever that is, and it pulls up a map with all the resources, and you type a keyword. So if it's food, type food. If it's counseling services, type counseling services. And the bank is great and wide, and you can find those resources for your needs. Because sometimes I know it's hard to go to someone and say, hey, this is the resource I need. So this is a way you can search that out on your own time and meet the needs of your family in a way that makes sense for you. Another great resource, I think, for parents is pta.org. And so if you're part of your local PTA in your own school, you probably are aware of this, but PTA actually has a parent resource page. And I find that it's actually really nice because not only does it give you the resources that they have readily available to you as a family, but they also list some really great resources that are other links to other sites. And there's a couple I really want to point out. One is just called Child Mind Institute. A lot of great resources on what parents can do with families to set up routines and structures and to deal with the conversations regarding the pandemic. There's multicultural coronavirus resources there, and actually they're based in here in Colorado. So the direct link to a Colorado resource. And there's all kinds of things from tackling the stress that your family is experiencing, dealing with anxiety together. And those are things that I think you can directly link from pta.org. And the best way to find that is just to go to the Family Resource tab. And the very first one is, it's called COVID-19 PTA Resources, and it's tackling COVID-19 together. So a great resource for families, lots of family-focused resources for you to access. The other things to think about that are connected to the district are, we have counselors, psychologists, social workers that you can reach out to in our schools that are readily available to connect with your student and to also point you in other ways for resources. We also have some really strong partnerships, and they existed prior to the pandemic, and you can engage in telehealth and counseling services. And we partner with ThriveWorks, a local mental health practitioner, and also Aspen Point are available in many of our schools, and contacting your co-counselor, psychologist, or social worker can point you in the right direction to get that. But let me just end with a couple of things as you think about things you might start doing right away with your family. One is, can you start your day and end your day with just a moment, a couple of deep breaths, right? Taking a pause, taking some deep breaths to really center yourself. The other is thinking about, can you write maybe some things about gratitude? I know it's hard right now to think about how you might be grateful for what's going on. And that's probably even more of a reason to identify one or two things each day that you're grateful for, and have a conversation with your family about what those things are for you and for them, and really hear what they're grateful for. The other thing that you can do is build a routine. Find a way to have a consistent, ongoing routine for your family that includes some sort of being exercise or being mobile. Because I know for myself, my own child, we're sitting a lot, and being sedentary is not the most healthy thing for your life. So how can you get out and regularly move, go for a walk in the neighborhood? I know it's chilly, but getting out there, I think, will do a lot for yourself and for your family. And I can't stress enough, give yourself some patience and some grace, and know that it's not going to always be easy, but you're going to find a way to have a conversation with whoever is in your home to get through the struggles that you're going through. And that with that, try to find friends, families to connect with virtually right now, and be able to share what's going on for you and be open about what's going on and what you're experiencing. So Patty, I'll turn it back over to you, and thanks for the opportunity to share those resources.
Thank you, Corey. And sorry I walked over you a few minutes ago. I had forgotten to mute. So next, John and Melissa.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me know if you all can see that.
We can see it.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for this opportunity to share a little bit about the technology resources and support that we're providing for families. My name is John McCarran. I'm the Assistant Superintendent and Chief Information Officer for the district, and my co-presenter tonight is Melissa Smead. She's our Director of Instructional Technology and Library Resources. And I wanted to highlight 5 key areas that we're working to provide the right technology and the right support for our families. And so the first one is a common online learning management system. Last year, when the pandemic hit and we went to full remote learning, teachers were using a wide variety of websites and applications to engage our students. And we heard loud and clear from our families that this was very difficult to manage and confusing at times. And so this year, we have standardized on Seesaw learning management system for our pre-kindergarten through 2nd graders and Schoology for our 3rd through 12th grade students. And of course, when you're working remotely or even when you're using technology to supplement learning, every student needs a device. And we were so thrilled to be able to invest $6.5 million of CARES Act funding into devices for our students. So pre-kindergarten through 2nd graders are utilizing iPads. We have Chromebooks for our 3rd through 8th grade students and Windows laptops for our high school students. And of course, as already mentioned, internet access is absolutely critical, not only in school, but at home. And our survey research and school outreach clearly shows that at least 10% of our families struggle with home internet access. And so we responded by cranking up our internet signal in our schools to extend the internet out into our school parking lots wherever we could. The D11 Foundation initiated the Internet Equity Project, which has provided free internet for over 1,300 families to date. More recently, T-Mobile's Project 10 Million provided 1,600 free hotspots for D11 families. So my message tonight is please contact your school if you need assistance. We have resources to help you. Now, we all know high quality technical support is the glue that holds this all together. And I want to make sure that our families know the District 11 Technical Support Center is available not only for staff, but also for you, for our families. Monday through Friday, 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Just give us a call at 520-2211. You'll talk with a live person. We can help answer your questions or go through a troubleshooting process with your technology. As a note, students should continue to request support directly through their teacher or their library technology educator. And so with that, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Melissa Smead, and she's going to talk about some of the online resources that we've published out on our website.
Good evening, District 11 community. Thank you for your time tonight. So you can see right here that I'm going to talk through 3 different areas that we are providing support, hopefully directly to you. I am now going to switch over to sharing my screen that highlights first a website that is on right on our District 11 homepage. So if I hover over families and community and click on technology tips for families, John first talked about that we have multiple different device types for our students. And so we have device support broken down by those device types. So we have hardware tips and tricks for you around iPads as well as Chromebooks, along with the predominant systems that are used, instructional programs around support around for our families, Seesaw, Schoology, along with email, and then some of our heavy hitters and our content areas. The other area that you will see is resources and research for our library world, both with physical books, how to check out physical books when we are back in session, along with utilizing the one-to-one aspect that we have in our districts now and how to check out online materials. This also highlights areas that we have available to really promote a partnership with our Pikes Peak Library District, including their homework helper for elementary students along with our high school and middle school students. But right now, I want to also take you up to the top right here where it says click here for great resources that help families keep their kids safe on the internet. We know that we're now working remote. Everybody's working remote. Learning is remote. And if I click on this right here, this is going to take you to a website called Common Sense Media. This is a website that both our staff and and you all have access to, and it gives resources in here from articles that are in English as well as Spanish to just guide both teachers as well as our families to have a common language to really support our students in how to make themselves safe online, what our digital citizenship is, what our digital footprint is, and how to navigate this new remote learning world that we are in. What I also want to make sure that you all know, I am going to stop sharing my screen. That's a little bit difficult at times. What I also want you all to know is that webpage that is initially on the D11 webpage has been replicated out to all of our school web pages. We know that the school community is often the most close-knit that our families have. They have the most local resources and relationship with our school communities. That website has been replicated out to all of our schools. So if you as a family member are most comfortable going to, say, Monroe or Mitchell or Holmes or Rudy, please feel free to go there. And that technology tips is right off of that website. And as John mentioned earlier, there's a library technology educator there waiting and willing and poised and ready to help you not only navigate the technology, the technical issues, the assignments that might be coming up, but also how do I get access to this internet that John was talking about. So we are ready to do both the learning side and the technology side. We're ready to help. So just lean in on your school library technology educator, and we're there to help you. Thanks so much.
Thank you, John and Melissa. That was helpful.
Hey, Patty.
Yes, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you. Before we move on, I just I thought of a question that might exist in our community based upon the first part of the information that Mr. McCarron was sharing, and that is about the Wi-Fi access. And just want to maybe ask this on behalf of anybody in our community. So I might be a family who has Wi-Fi access. Maybe it's not the fastest speed. We heard one of our students tonight talking about, 6 students sharing the bandwidth in addition to, whatever else, might be on that system at the house. Could be a TV, could be an Alexa, whatever it might be. Can those families reach out for additional Wi-Fi support, for example, so they could have a hotspot or something of that nature so that they're not plagued by some of the bandwidth issues of 6 people using high quality resolution, instructional screens? Even though I might have it already, do I qualify?
Absolutely. If in the scenario you just outlined where we have multiple students trying to share an internet connection, we can absolutely supplement that with one of the various options, whether that's a T-Mobile hotspot or working with our internet equity program with the D11 Foundation. So just reach out to your school and let them know about the need, and we'll connect you with the right resource.
Thank you for that.
Fabulous, fabulous. Thank you all for that information. As we start the question and answer portion of this evening with our panelists, please know that we have more than 17 questions that have been submitted. I need you to know that the first few questions are remaining questions that were submitted last time we met, and we told you we would address them, and indeed we will. Remember that you have the opportunity to submit questions in the future by using the link on the D11 website. I'll go over some of that at the end of the evening. We'll begin with the questions from last time. Please know that I and the panelists do not have access to the questions that are being asked on Facebook. We do have a moderator there that is gathering questions that if we still have time at the end of these questions, we will entertain the questions submitted there. I want to remind everyone that this is a community conversation, and we, above all things, ask everyone to be respectful with your comments. We also encourage a solution orientation. And if you have a thought on how to positively move forward, please feel free to submit your ideas on Facebook. So if everyone's ready, we're going to begin with the questions submitted. And we did hear earlier with the first question from Brianna, and we'll go to question number 2 from Brianna as well.
So here's a parent question. How are we going to help kids that are falling behind or even failing with school? Is it fair to hold them back?
Who would like to try that one first? David Engstrom? Thank you.
That's a really good question because, we last year in the spring, when we quickly went into remote learning, we made a decision as a district that no student's grade should be penalized because of these unfortunate circumstances that we were put into. And so how that translated was that we said that whatever a student's grade was after March 13th, when we went to remote learning, a student's grade could only increase. They could only show more learning, and that we wouldn't have anyone have their grade go down or ultimately fail because of the circumstances of the pandemic. Well, that led to a massive amount of disengagement from our students because a lot of our students decided, if I'm locked in at this grade, I don't need to do much more work. And so there was a downside for us of making that decision. And this year in the fall, we made the decision that we're going to assess and grade students as we normally would grade and assess, which part of that could be that if a student is not showing their learning or is not learning, that they could potentially fail. And now we have, as a district, we're paying attention to our failure rate and our D and F rate, especially at the high school level. And we realize that there are families and there are students that are falling behind and are struggling. And so before we would ever have a teacher give a failing grade to a student, that we need to look at the options of extending deadlines for a student, or providing interventions, or tutoring support. And we are putting all of those forward because we don't want students to fail in this environment. But with all of the challenges, there are students who are disengaging and that are not participating, or just because of attendance aren't even being present. So we're concerned of the rates, and yet we are working with our teachers and our principals of what resources we can be providing for students, of time and curricular types of resources. But ultimately, your question was, is that fair to like even hold a student back? And we've looked at the research on this, And the research has shown is that students that are held back, that oftentimes is not a practice that is beneficial for them in the long run. And so while we do have a process of where a parent in communication with the school can identify their child as saying they may need to be retained for another year, but it is going to be a relationship that and a conversation that the school has with the parent. We are not in a position as a district we're going to say everybody repeats third grade. We are not going to do that. It will be specific to a student's needs, and it will be a conversation with a parent.
Thank you, David. The next question is going to be asked by Destiny, and I believe, Dr. Thomas, we're going to come to you for a response once she's asked the question.
This is a staff parent question. Is there a way to open middle school and elementary school rather than just possibly elementary school? Because studies have shown that middle school students are more vulnerable.
Thank you. That's a great question. And not sure of the timing of when this question was asked. We could have been in different formats at one point in time. So this is a carryover. But right now, our middle schools and elementary schools are open for in-person learning 4 days a week with asynchronous learning on Mondays, 1 day a week, which includes both individualized student support, as I mentioned earlier, vis-a-vis office hours that might be pre-assigned with students. That could also be informal check-ins, with student progress. Staff are also provided opportunities to meet as grade level teams, for example, or department teams to review how students are doing and find better ways to increase instruction where they might be falling off, as well as to share promising practices that they want to continue to replicate where we're highly engaging our students. And so they have that day to be able to do a lot of that collaboration work as well. So currently, when we return back to school in person, elementary, middle, again, will be on the same schedule.
Thank you for that. Destiny is going to ask our next question, which is question 4.
This is a question from a community member. What is the minimum expectations of parents during remote learning, and can teachers give a failing grade?
Patty,
Thank you.
I'll take that, and heads up to Brian. I'm probably going to throw it over to you to give kind of an elementary example of what this would look like. I think we've already kind of answered the second part of that question of can teachers give a failing grade? And so what is the minimal expectation of parents? First and foremost, parents, thank you. Thank you for what you are doing there of supporting your child or children in these trying circumstances of having to have students learn from home. And when I look at the panel right here, many of us are parents. I'm a parent of a child here in 11th grade here in District 11, and so we know what it feels like. We know what that looks like, and so when we talk about minimal expectations, well, that really depends on the age of the child, because that will look different at elementary and will look different at middle school, and it will look different at high school, because there's kind of this gradual release that parents learn over time as they give their child more responsibility for their learning as they mature as a learner in our system. And so again, that will look different at the different age levels. Speaking as a parent of an 11th grader, I'm at a point where I'm just doing some check-ins, seeing how things are going, and I can be more hands-off. If you're the parent of a first grader or a kindergartner, then that's going to take maybe more of watching and saying, please help the teacher by sitting down right now. I mean, it's going to take much more interaction. And I'd like maybe Brian to go a little bit deeper on that, because I think that's probably where the most challenging grade level is at that elementary level, and all of the energy that those elementary school students have and when they are learning from home. So Brian, do you want to piggyback on what I'm sharing?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Engstrom. And what a great question, especially for our young learners. We all know the importance of that first experience in school, especially for our kindergartners. And we want it to be a positive one, not only as a kindergartner, but within District 11. So we thank our parents for the continued teamwork, and we also want to thank you for the communication. One piece of that I'd like to emphasize on behalf of the elementary folks is that it's important to ensure that you're following through with the schedules that the schools are sharing, either by grade level, by specials, before and after school clubs and activities that may be available, because in that early age, it's important, as we all know as parents, I mean, mine are in high school and college, to establish those routines, to get them into the habits of best practices on becoming the best learners they can be at the elementary level. And within that, to follow that schedule throughout the day to the best of your ability. As Mr. Notstein said, sometimes that'll mean you'll need to take some breaks and give your students grace, but it's important to check on them and to follow that schedule to the best of your ability within your current environment. Finally, I would encourage the communication piece from our parents. Please continue to let us know what's working and what's not. That way our teachers and our principals can make those adjustments to meet the needs of your children, because ultimately that relationship that we develop with you will positively impact our young learners and make this a more successful experience for them throughout this entire remote learning experience.
Thank you for that. We're going to go to question 5, and Brianna, we're up to you.
So this next question is also from a parent. What can we do to ensure academic integrity? How do we know that kids aren't copy and pasting off the internet or even cheating on a test?
Who would like to take that one?
That probably has to still come to me because it's an academics question. There's two ways to look at academic integrity, and one is what Brianna had mentioned, of just that would be flat out teaching or cheating and plagiarism. And our teachers are very good at ways that they can check and how they can look at their own resources, or they can scan resources for that type of thing. But there's another side to academic integrity, and that is actually of just the consistency of education that's happening in District 11 across grade levels and across schools, and so I mean that's a concern that we have as we're so decentralized. I mean, someone once said, "Is there a more decentralized business in the world than all of the teachers going into a classroom and closing their door and teaching?" And now we are doing that, and all of the learning is happening decentralized out in homes too. And so as part of trying to ensure that we have that we have that integrity across of our system, is that we're really working with our classroom lessons are to be standards aligned, and that they're rigorous, and that they're ambitious is a word that we like to use, of ambitious instruction, and to give resources to teachers on that. That happens a lot at that school level, and especially on that Monday planning day, when we have teams of teachers coming together to learn from each other and to determine what's working, what is not working, what's a best practice, how are you getting those types of results, and that as they then plan out their lessons over the week, to ensure that there is consistency happening across, especially those grade level teams. But I was hoping there'd be an opportunity where I could share this, and so I'm hoping I can share my screen right now too, because we have a commitment as a district of developing our staff also. And when I say of developing our staff, of what type of professional development are we offering? And so on January 4th is a professional development day. and hear from the district. I wanted to show you of what is actually 7 pages of options of what we're providing for our teachers. And I'm scrolling through this on Facebook. It might be making people dizzy, but there's 7 pages of options of what is either going to be live WebEx professional development or TEDx Talks type of professional development from all aspects of from social emotional learning to technology to academics, being taught or instructed by downtown, by specific teachers in our schools, and of how we are developing our teaching staff and our counselors and others that are working directly with students, but also how we're learning from each other during this time. And so a lot of this that's going to happen on January the 4th, and I'm just going to show you, there's 7 pages over the course of that day of options of how people can say, this is what I need right now. And then many of these resources are still going to be able to be available online so that teachers after the fact can go back and review it and look at it maybe for a first time too. So this is a professional development plan for the 4th, but also what will continue on and be a resource for the upcoming year or the second semester as we're trying to build integrity across grade levels and across schools in District 11. So I'm really glad that I can actually show that of how much work that the district is doing to develop our staff to be prepared for this type of work.
Thank you, David, for that. Dr. Thomas, I'm going to come to you with this next question that Destiny's going to ask.
This is a question from a parent. How can we have consistency due to teachers teaching versus parents teaching?
Well, thank you for that question. And I think that consistency comes with a little bit of what we just heard Deputy Engstrom just sharing about how teachers are every week aligning their practices in both the virtual instructional realm as well as, how they are preparing for students who are, physically in our schools. And what I shared earlier as well, and that is that continued communication with our classroom and school-based staff, with our families to ensure we have that open line of communication so that if there are challenges that students and families are experiencing, with school due to some of these conditions, that we are there ready to respond. And when things are going well for our students, we also want to hear that too, because we want to know that if we made a great inroad and a great impact, through a modality of instruction, we want to be able to share that, as Deputy Engstrom said, come next Monday, something that I learned that happened in one of my classrooms, I want to be able to now meet with my team and then share, that feedback so that we can find ways again to collaborate and bring that, consistent practice, across the grade level or department, whatever it might be.
Great. Thank you for that. Our last question from Destiny is ready.
This is a question from a parent. What is D11 doing to ensure that students stay engaged rather than being distracted by phones or other electronics?
Mr. Engstrom?
So is that question asking, are students playing Pokemon Go instead of learning? Father of an 11th grader. Okay. So, this is a challenge for our staff, even in-person learning. Okay. Are our students connected? Are our students engaged? Are our students distracted? And so depending on the grade level, there are strategies that teachers can use. I'd like to point one out. I was a virtual visitor on Friday into a 3rd grade classroom over at Penrose, and this teacher, her strategy was every student on the screen had a predetermined role, and that any time they could be called upon in order to fulfill that role as part of the learning of that classroom. And she did a remarkable job with squirrely third graders who wanted to be distracted on a Friday afternoon. And yet, because they had a role, she could call on them to fulfill their role. And granted, I was a guest in the room also. And that's just one of the types of examples of what our teachers are doing in order to build engaging strategies with their students so that the students aren't tempted to pick up their phone and be doing things on their phone. And there are a myriad of types of these strategies that our teachers are using in this new environment to ensure that. So I don't know if anyone else, Brian, if anyone else wants to add of other things that they have seen of strategies that teachers are using.
Thank you, Mr. Engstrom. Along those lines, I would agree first and foremost that this is something that is an ongoing daily struggle. As we know, especially at elementary, some days their attention span is quite long in length, and other days it's a little bit shorter, just possibly due to a variety of factors that are even out of their control within their development. One of the things that I've observed most in visiting classrooms, not only at elementary, but from hearing from my colleagues in high school and middle school, is using a variety of technology tools to mix up the ability for students to create projects, whether it's independently, with teams, and then how can they present them? They give them a variety of ways to spend time working together so that it's just not teacher talking, students listening. It's interacting time with themselves and with their peers so that they can build on that connection as well while creating an engaging project or presentation to share throughout their academic time together.
Thank you for that. And I wanted to thank Destiny and Brittany for their work in helping us and bring the student voice to our panel this evening. I'm going to continue with the question asking, and we have just a little difference than what some of you may know. The next question is this: what is the plan for catching up the students that are falling behind due to being in the challenges of unlearning, specifically in the special education realm?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I will say that we know that many of our students, and we see this across the nation and national statistics, that many of our students, due to the conditions of COVID, are not doing as well as they could be doing. And even with our teachers being creative and innovative and finding ways to engage and all of what we just heard in that last question, again, these conditions are not ideal, but I do appreciate everything that our staff is doing to connect with our students to keep them, in that learning modality. But nonetheless, we know that replicating what happens in the classroom in a virtual space, even though this year we weren't thrust into it like we were last spring, it's still a space that many staff have never been fully prepared, to engage in. Again, teacher prep schools, unless you're going specifically for an online, experience, teacher prep schools are preparing staff to be in classrooms with students. And we're doing everything we can to continually develop and support our staff as they're going through this time of virtual, in-person, and perhaps hybrid instruction. And what we know that we are going to have to do as a district is that every student is going to demonstrate a varied learning curve. And we already know that some of our students in certain student demographic groups have some additional support necessary outside of COVID times. So in this case, we're asking, students that are receiving support through special education, and that could be a variety of supports that they have. And we know that we're going to have to work with our students, and I'll specifically start with our students receiving special education support, that we are legally meeting the requirements of that individual education plan. That's a non-negotiable for us. Now, I want to be very clear with our community. Yes, we might have barriers to replicating some of how the conditions were set in those individual education plans. We've had some meetings with families to perhaps make revisions to those IEPs given the context that we're in, so that we can still meet the legal obligations, but then also meet the learning obligations that those students present to us every single day. That is our moral imperative to ensure that we deliver on that support. I know that we'll have to look even more deeply this summer. So some of our students that may not typically qualify for ESY or extended year, that's a conversation we're going to have to explore to see if, given these conditions, are there extensions of that extended school year option for students who might not historically meet that requirement based upon these unique features, so that we can provide that additional summer support for our students receiving special education. I would also say those same supports that I'm mentioning that are specifically tied to our students receiving special education are applicable to many students in our district right now. And obviously we have legal requirements, as I first spoke to with students receiving special ed supports, but we also have requirements to meet all students' needs in District 11. And that's going to be something that we are committing ourselves to right now as we're building out a structure for what that summer support program will look like. We know that we're going to need it this summer, but we also know one summer is not going to cure a year's worth of academic loss, roughly. I mean, we're talking since last March. And we're seeing, playing this out all the way until we return, knock on wood, next fall in a more normal physical realm. But we're going to have to build in some of those scaffolds into next school year, because the summer won't be enough to make up. We talk about summer slide, which is a annual kind of learning loss that happens outside of, again, non-COVID conditions. And we're going to see that, increase for this summer. And so we need to find ways as we build out next school year and build our budget for next school year, that we're going to have to find ways, for example, and I'm just going to put these out there as for examples, and it's not concrete into next year, but, how can we take advantage of some of the break times that we have in the year to open up perhaps a fall and winter break academy, where we identify students based upon their needs, based upon families' ability and willingness to engage during that time frame, to continually offer some of those additional supports. I know I'll never be popular with our student group if we talk about Saturday academies, but again, I think we have to look at every possible solution that's outside of our typical learning day that's going to provide that additional support so that students can be caught up with some of the learning loss that they experience due to the conditions of COVID.
Thank you for that. The next question I'm going to direct to you, Mr. Relic. How can parents best advocate for and partner with the district to get our students back in person after the new year?
Thank you, Mrs. Pierce. I think that's a great question, because as we all realize and know, and as we all mentioned, we're all parents ourselves of kids. The most important thing that you can do is not only stay involved with their educational opportunities at the school level. One thing that I would suggest and recommend to our families and our parents and guardians, if possible and your schedule permits, please participate in your local school's PTA, PTO meetings. There are regularly also held school accountability committee meetings. Those sets of meetings, folks, they're generally held on a monthly basis. They can be found at your school's website as far as a meeting schedule, or please even further reach out to the teachers that you're working with or your principals. And at a district level, it's very important that as parents, you continue to support and communicate with us around what's working and what's not. One way to do that is through the surveys that Dr. Thomas and our Board of Education have been putting out on a quarterly basis. Another way to do that is to attend and virtually participate in our board meetings as possible, so that you can participate through the citizens' comments, And then last but not least is then to reach out to your school's executive directors and or Dr. Thomas as well to share your insights and thoughts about returning and or not returning, because as we know, there's a diverse range along that continuum of the preference at this time. So those are just some simple examples that parents can utilize to get more involved. Mrs. Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Relic. And moving right along, I'm going to go to the next question. And Dr. Thomas, I'm going to come to you. Why are we in a rush to return on 1/6 after holiday gatherings? Do we have any safety concerns?
Thank you for that question. And we're not in a rush to return on 1/6. I want to share with our community, and you've got my commitment as your superintendent. We will always work with our health officials. I'm a doctor, but I'm not a medical doctor, and I have to trust those leaders in our medical profession. And there's varied leaders, everybody in varying roles and varying perspectives. And you all know as well as I do, even some of the health data that we get can be conflicting. And so I have to use my judgment, my level of discernment with my team to make the best recommendations to, one, ensure that our students are safe and that our staff are safe, and that we can reduce the level of kind of bouncing back and forth as we talked about earlier this evening. And so we are working with our local health officials to ensure that when we do return, that we have a more guaranteed ability to keep our schools open. And as I shared at our last board meeting last Wednesday, our ability to keep our schools open is not only our responsibility as staff, but it's our responsibility as a community. I'll be the first to admit, a lot of the protocols that we are adhering to can be an additional challenge. Wearing masks continually, the distancing, the lack of ability to see people physically, the constant hand washing. I don't know. Lotion providers are probably making a lot of money. My hands are raw all the time. Those are a lot of inconvenient things, but those are some of those small acts that we hear our mayor talk about, Mayor Southers here in Colorado Springs, that we can individually do as community members to ensure we bring those community numbers down. Because once the community levels go down, that allows schools and I'll say our businesses to remain open. And I can't say this enough. Being in our schools is the best, I believe, and our staff believe this, for our students. Many students, are thriving in that virtual space or that hybrid space too. And it's not all for a loss, but a majority of our students will do much better when we have them physically in our schools and the ability to mentally engage, not fearing that my school is going to be closed or quarantined again. And again, I'm hopeful that as our practices continue in our community and bringing the community numbers down, we are now hearing of the first vaccines coming to the market that, people will make decisions for their families or themselves as individuals whether or not they'll get those vaccinations. But again, just to reiterate, medical professionals are stating that we would need about 70% of our community to participate for those vaccines to have a permanent, more lasting effect. Again, I want to be very clear with our community. I'm not telling you what to do or not to do. I'm just merely stating, options that are coming into the conversation space that ultimately we believe will, allow us to come back into our schools next fall in a much more normal, if not completely normal fashion. That is what we're striving for in District 11. And that is what we feel is going to be best for our students and our overall community.
Thank you, Dr. The next question I'm going to direct to you, Dr. Kolicki. Will the state or district assessments be based on an e-learning format? And is there any difference due to the fact that students learned online?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we are in constant contact with state and CDE on the status of testing. So I'll speak to state testing first and then district testing second, because they are separate things. As it stands now, the CMAS and April testing schedule is on as usual. We are waiting for further guidance, and the state accountability group has recommended to the state board that testing be suspended again for this year due to the various challenges and things that have due to online and remote learning. So that's the recommendation, but there's been no guidance given yet. So as it stands, testing is in April. The guidance from CDE and the leadership of our board have put the desires of remote families in remote situations, so remote learning, as the first priority, and maintaining healthy protocols for that. So if testing occurs, we will put the status of remote learners first above a testing requirement. What we do know from the Colorado Department of Education is that there will be no remote testing for state tests. So those test makers and publishers have made it very clear that they won't support remote testing, so that if they go forward, it will only be in a face-to-face fashion. So if we are in remote learning, then there will be no way to take those tests. If we are in face-to-face, then it will be remote. It will be as normal, face-to-face, and then we will prioritize our remote families and their needs and their desires first above testing. So it's kind of a roundabout answer, I understand, and we are waiting for guidance for what testing looks like in the spring. That guidance will probably come later in January, and we will let everyone know what that is. But right now, the recommendation is no testing in the spring, but we are waiting for that official guidance.
Great.
So that's related to state testing. District testing, we are supporting remote testing, and you've all experienced that with our universal screener. And we are looking at differences between taking the test remotely and taking the test in person, because we have a mixture of both situations. So we will look at the effects of that. I can't help but believe that there will be an effect. However, we do want to continue to be committed to academic excellence and academic performance and measuring that over time. And so that's why we've committed ourselves to the universal screener, so that regardless of what the state decides, we're in a position where we can measure growth and measure academic learning over this year.
Great. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Ms. Bailey, I'm going to come to you next. And the question is this: I have heard through others that D11 is short on subs. Is there a plan to publicly ask parents and the community for help?
Thank you, Mrs. Pierce, for that question. And thank you that submitted that question, because now you have afforded me the opportunity to send out all call and share what it is that we are planning on doing for our teachers and the district to help support them with subs. Let me share this document that will go live in the principal's levers communication. So in an effort to assist our schools with creating a larger pool of substitutes during the COVID-19 pandemic, guest staff will begin a new process to rehire interested 2019-20 teachers and ESP retirees that retired no earlier than August 1st, 2020, and as guest staff teacher substitutes and as guest staff ESP substitutes. So more or less, we're asking principals to reach out to employees that retired last year. They are going to fast track and expedite the hiring process to get the individuals on the list, and also to have principals be aware of former employees that, you know what, I want to come back and I want to help support my school and also support the district. In addition, CDE has streamlined the hiring process for substitutes in the state of Colorado. So we are not the only district that is having a difficulty with having substitutes, come into schools. So as a result, CDE has streamlined the process for teachers and for ESP. Here are some of the requirements for community members that may be interested in qualifying and becoming a sub for our district. Right now, we are still hiring. We have never stopped hiring and trying to recruit subs during the time that our schools have been in a remote setting. If you will go on our district website, you will see where there is a link where you can go ahead and apply. We will not start the onboarding process until students are back in classrooms, because we want to be good stewards of our taxpayer dollars. So if we bring them on and we don't necessarily have our kids in classrooms, then we are responsible for paying them through the unemployment compensation.
Thank you for that, Phoebe. The next question, I think we've covered a lot of it, but I'm gonna put it out there if anyone has something different to add to this quickly. What happens next year when children are all over the map with grades from this year? Do we separate the kids who did well from the kids who need to catch up? Dr. Thomas, do you want to just chime in on that?
Yeah, I think I'll just be brief. No, we don't do that. That exists right now. We have students on, in the same grade, in the same classroom with varying levels of learning based upon their previous year's learning, as well as based around their own family and experiences that they have. So that situation exists right now. And so what our staff, need to do and can continually do is differentiation, or find ways to meet those unique learning needs that each student presents. I would also say, again, from our standpoint, and I don't want to speak for Dr. K, but we have a universal screener that is something that's a non-high stakes test, but it is probably one of the best informational data pieces that we can get as staff, as well as sharing that with our families. That's a very formative way of kind of taking a regular, academic temperature check of our students to make sure that they're healthy, and finding ways from that universal screener to see where are there gaps or holes that we need to fill, how many, how deep. It's very important to us in District 11 in this community. This is not a state-driven assessment. It's not a standardized assessment. but it is a very useful tool for us and for our family. So I can't stress that enough. We'll be coming up, on another window for our universal screener shortly. And again, I highly encourage our families to make sure our students are engaging with that. It can be done in person as well as remotely. And I want to tell our students, this is not a high pressure test. We want you to, do as well as you can. This helps us understand where we need to continually support you all throughout the year, not something that comes at the end of the year and we don't get your results until you've already moved on, to the next grade. So just want to share that. That's what we'll be using as one of our greatest tools to kind of level that instructional space in the classroom.
Thank you for that. And I think I have time for about a 90-second answer, Corey, from you, if you wouldn't mind. What type of resources are there for single parents raising an introvert, gifted student who has no friends?
Yeah, it's a great question from that parent. And there is the National Association for Gifted Children, so nagc.org, and they have resources for families that are directly related to the students that are participating in our Gifted and Magnet programs. That's one place. Another place that parent could do is reach out directly to the school and speak to their counselor, speak to their social worker, speak to their psychologist within the building to see if they can connect directly with that student, to be able to develop those skills and continue to work on the social emotional learning competencies that would help develop that child skill set to continue to thrive while at home until we can get back into the direct instruction in our school.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Well, we've addressed as many questions as the time permits, but I'd like to conclude tonight by getting some final thoughts from our panelists as we begin to wrap up. Anyone want to share anything that they want our community to know that we didn't touch on? Okay. Dr. Thomas?
I'm just going to say thank you again, and just really appreciate the opportunity to interact with our community, whether it's in person in small safe groups or if it's large virtual convenings such as this, where we know that we get thousands of people that watch this after the stream. We can't thank you enough. Our families are our first and foremost teachers of our students. I've said that earlier, and I'll just close with that. And it's our strong desire to continually partner with our families so that we are in alignment and can offer the best instruction and support to your students each and every day here in D11. We're proud to be here during these really challenging times, and we are proud to remain here, when we are on the backside of COVID.